And I remember us pace lining full speed, 25 miles an hour, and then watching as riders literally like rode up until their bottom bracket into mud and then toppled off the side of their bike, like in front of us. Like it was like a cartoon. And us being like, oh, this is it. This is the mud section. And you and I, doing our cool, flying dismount, cyclocross ready, like great, shoulder our bikes, run up the first hill thinking like, we're like sprinting, like this is going to be it. This is like our guys are falling back. We're going to make our move right now. Like while these guys start dealing with the mud, we already prepared for this. Carmichael gave us the tip and like we run to the top of the hill. And then as far as we can see, it's just people walking their bikes because the mud is so bad that the road is unrideable. And just the terrible feeling inside, being like, oh, this is going to be a really long day.
This is Andrew Vance, and you're listening to Choose the Hard Way, where the world's top performers share lessons learned at the limits of human experience. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, subscribe, and forward it to a friend. That helps the show surface higher in search so more people can find the inspiring stories of my guests, and I really appreciate the support. Go to choosethehardway.com to sign up for the newsletter and never miss an episode. To suggest a guest or be in touch, reach out to choosethehardway@gmail.com or DM @hardwaypod on Instagram or Twitter. Pro cycling world champions, national champions, and world record holders like Stephen Hyde, Ashton Lambie, and past Hardway guest Rebecca Rush are among the legendary winners of the Unbound Gravel 100 cycling race. Held annually in Emporia, Kansas, it's one of the most prestigious and competitive gravel bike races in the world, and it's actually 105 miles, not 100 miles. In 2022, multi-time cycling road race world champion Peter Sagan, who has won 17 stages in cycling grand tours and has also won the green jersey at the Tour de France 7 times, will toe the line and contest the race. In 2015, riding with my good friend, training partner, content marketing ace, and now rising TikTok star at Blake of Today, I took second place at the Unbound 100 for the second year in a row. If you're new to Choose the Hard Way, go back to episode 19 to hear about the first time I got second in the Unbound 100 in 2014. I skipped 2 weddings of close friends in the month before the 2015 Unbound 100, so Blake and I could get in our final key 7-hour training rides on the weekends leading up to the event. My equipment was dialed. My nutrition was dialed. I never trained harder, and I left no stone unturned in any aspect of preparation for the race. That all added up to losing and taking second place. Severe food poisoning. The generous wisdom of Chris Carmichael, a magical tiny screwdriver purchased at Rite Aid, wielded in a scene from Game of Thrones in the middle of the race. Aero bars, the actual physical location in the human body of the spirit of gravel. This experience had it all. Losing isn't fun, but it's often funny. Sit back and listen to this tale of 2 humans who did everything to try to win and lost anyway. This episode is part of Life Cycles, a new series I've launched within Choose the Hard Way. Conversations in this series cover the topics you've come to expect from Choose the Hard Way, with guests whose lives and careers have been shaped by cycling or whose lives and careers have shaped the world of cycling. If you have a great story about losing, I'd love to hear it. Hit me on Twitter or Instagram @HardwayPod, and you can find Blake on TikTok and Instagram @BlakeOfToday. Find those links in the show notes. High performance is for everyone. Choose the hard way. Blake, when you think back to 2015 and the Unbound Gravel 100, can you tell me a little bit about your early experimentation with aero bars?
There was, a few things. I have a history as a triathlete. Everybody experimented a little bit in college, and I did my fair share of sitting in the aero bars. As you may recall from the Tamales Bay incident between you and I, where you weren't necessarily able to hold my wheel as I got into that aggressive aero position on our way back from a long ride. I've never ridden aero bars on gravel at the time, or early days. It just felt kind of sacrilegious, and something that, you wanted to keep those two streams separate. But I have a fair share of aero bar experience in my past.
Now, Blake, we don't have to get into the disgraceful manner in which you exited the sport of triathlon after overheating in a triathlon that became a duathlon in San Jose, where you went out on the initial run, super hot, and I believe actually melted down and became ill. You made sick on yourself, I believe. Is that what happened?
Yeah. I mean, we don't have to get into it, but we can. It was turned into a run bike run event. And so it was like a mile long run, whatever Olympic distance bike, and then a 10K after that. And I thought that it would be awesome if I ran the fastest mile I've ever ran in my life on that first run. So I came into transition probably in the top three, and then couldn't find my bike, panicked, lost like 20 positions. And as soon as I got out on my bike, I was very ill because I had overheated and worked very hard on that initial run, which did not pay dividends.
And then following that event, that's when you retired from the sport.
That's when I committed myself to gravel and mountain bike and cyclocross racing. Correct. Yeah.
Right. And during that initial mile, your fastest mile ever, did you consume anything off of your fuel belt during that run?
No, but I consumed something immediately as soon as I got on my bike, which was, my general practice after transition one. And it didn't stay in me for very long.
Very well. So fast forward to 2015. And for those who are not...
Sorry to interrupt. I believe it was a chocolate Roctane, and I still can't taste chocolate. I can still it still makes me ugh.
Just a little taste. Very well. Fast forwarding to 2015 and the Unbound Gravel 100 as the event is known today. And the lead up to this race, we spent 6 months preparing, training extensively. It was very similar to the training montage in Rocky 3 when Rocky, of course, famously fought Ivan Drago, the Russian machine. And except this took 6 months of training rather than that compressed 2-minute montage you may have seen in the Rocky 3 films. I don't believe that the Tamales Bay incident, as it's known today, happened during this training period, but I would like to briefly cover it. So during that period of time, we were doing our long rides were up to probably, we peaked out at around 140 miles in our longest rides in preparation for this event. And during the Tamales Bay incident, we had ridden from the city of San Francisco and had gone to Tamales Bay, which is pretty far north. I believe that I stopped to make an adjustment to my gilet, my wind vest. And I don't remember, maybe I was having trouble unzipping it, rezipping it. And at that moment in time, as good training partners will do, just to create an extra, a level 3 challenge, if you will. Blake of Today, Instagram, TikTok, really decided to punch it and really took off and dropped me while I was on the side of the road putting my vest back on, I think. And that's when you got into your signature aero tuck. And as listeners who might not be familiar with the best practices of riding with a training partner over the course of, say, a 10-mile unbroken stretch of road, when it's just two people riding together, it's common that you would look behind yourself to make sure that your training partner is on your wheel, keeping pace. Maybe you would rotate through. During the Tamales Bay incident, of course, Blake, you stayed incredibly focused. I think this was, as a practitioner today of jiu-jitsu, this is probably the level of focus you bring to bear on your practice, I'm sure benefits you. But in that moment, you accelerated off like a rocket into the distance. And I did yell. I tried to flag you down. And others might have been dispirited, being in a single person chase for 10 miles. But for me, going back to the thesis of choose the hard way, that high performance is for everyone and that you are what you overcome. In that moment, I had the opportunity to overcome your fortitude, your dedication to being in an aerodynamic position on aero bars on a bike. I, of course, was not riding with aero bars. And eventually, I don't recall why you eventually pulled to the side of the road or slowed down after over 10 miles of not looking behind yourself. But do you recall?
I mean, I probably was getting lost on the one. And, I was in the zone. And no, I think we got back to Point Reyes Station, and I thought, well, Andy surely wants a croissant. Where is he? And I don't know. I thought maybe you'd pass me. Maybe you were ahead of me. On those days you were quite strong on a bike.
Yes. I don't know if I was strong those days or not, but anyhow, that of course is the Tamales Bay incident. I'm sure that when I caught up to you, the first thing you said to me was probably that I looked strong, probably like a looking strong bud, may have been chewing bubble gum and blowing bubbles. So let's move forward to the rest of the preparation for the Unbound 2015. What comes to mind for you when you think about?
I have this in my notes. It was so we prepared appropriately for the first time we did this race, and this was evidenced by our performance at that event. We had a few glitches in terms of technical stuff. I had a flat. You had a stomach issue. We maybe didn't make the best choices in terms of waiting for our riding partners in that first race. But other than that, our fitness was solid to have won that race, that event. And so I think we just, going into the second year, it was like clockwork. We were riding 300-ish miles a week. We had interval days on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We had a really long punishing ride on Saturdays, like a medium long ride on Sundays. The training was brutal, but it was dialed and we had done it before. And so it didn't feel as hard mentally, just because we knew it worked and we were going to go back. And I think in our heads, we were just like, okay, cool. We've got what it takes to win. We just need to not do these 2 or 3 technical mistakes and we could probably get through it this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the training was way more dialed. I think that year I'd started to work with a coach the previous year. I was working with a coach again in 2015, and then both of us just kind of did the workouts that adjusted to our individual wattage levels that I was getting from my coach, a 2-for-1, if you will, kind of the Netflix password sharing of training programs. But yeah, I would say we were in great shape going into it. And I mean, as you said, probably riding 300 miles a week, probably around 15 to 20 hours of training per week at least. And then you had the time going into food prep, which at that point in time, we were both eating a lot of solid food. And we had gone through a phase of being really into all the scratch rice cake recipes and spending a lot of time preparing and wrapping rice cakes. And then over time, I eventually gravitated to, I think, almond butter and jelly sandwiches on wheat bread. I was just like trying to find something that I could eat while riding at a high intensity. This is something we can get into later, because in subsequent years, I definitely found other better ways to fuel for long events like that, going to just a strictly liquid manner of fueling. But yeah, so those years, it was about going out. It was about getting in the miles. It was about getting used to eating a pretty large volume of food while riding. And the long training rides, like when we got up to 140 miles, it was taking I think close to 8 hours probably. And they were very, very hard rides. I remember, I think on our second to last or last really long training ride, my normalized power was very unspectacular relative to an elite athlete. But for me, at the size I was at the time, was pretty high. I had about a 290 watt normalized power for an over 7-hour ride. So we were riding pretty much as hard as we could. And then to make it even harder, we would sprint at the top of every hill on that route, which was it was a very hilly, rolling coastal route.
It was like 8 to 10K over the course of 100 to 140 miles. Man, it was brutal. And then we had different workouts also where we would attack every, a few minutes when we were on the flats to simulate that kind of race effort. The training was really hard. And Becca my wife still has flashbacks from every Friday night, me spending hours in the kitchen preparing my scratch rice bars and wrapping them and having a fridge full of them instead of us doing something fun like normal people did when they were dating. But she stuck it out. It was a big time commitment. And it's not looking back, it's not a lifestyle that is really sustainable for normal folks, but it's definitely worth the glory for our results.
Also as you noted, not highly conducive to interactions or relationships with other human beings either, particularly. It's kind of, right? Like all your time's going and riding, training, recovering, rolling around on the floor on a foam roller, making stuff to eat, going and riding again. So towards the end of the training cycle, I remember I shifted from making my sandwiches with wheat bread to the King's Hawaiian rolls I think I was doing, 50-50. Some I was doing with cream cheese and strawberry jelly. And then the other ones I was doing with Nutella and maybe like a little bit of almond butter, but just stuff that was relatively easy to eat. And looking back at it, I have no idea what I was thinking, because once we get into the race, there are a lot of sections of that race where like you really shouldn't take your hands off the handlebars, particularly in like the first 2 hours of the race. But once you start doing an event when you're racing for 6, 7, 8 hours, you need to start eating pretty much immediately if you want to have fuel at the end of the race. Food plays a big role in this one. So then we get to Kansas City where we go, right? And we go to my parents' house. Yeah,
we go to your parents' house, and having done this 1 year before, like all of these pieces were dialed. Like the bike travel was dialed. Plane flying overhead. Bike shipped perfectly, which, when you're traveling for a bike race as an amateur, that's something to really consider, is the anxiety of simply packing your bike and having everything get there, and then wondering if there's a bike shop in town to make sure that you can get prep for whatever you need, especially with an event like Unbound, where you have a very specific kind of tire that you're using. You have a very specific setup. You always, were experimenting or using some tire selection or a wheel selection that was, probably just had come out for gravel racing, because gravel racing wasn't very big at the time. So you have all these considerations when you travel. So we were very fortunate to have gotten there the second year and known how to do this, and known how to make sure that, when we get there, here's when we do our openers. Here's how we eat the days up until the race. Here's how we sleep the days up until the race. We had all of those parts, again, dialed from our previous experience. So we were feeling really confident that, we're just controlling for all of the possible things that could have gone wrong, so that when we show up on race day, we can destroy, because evidence had shown we were going to have done very well.
And part of what had happened between 2014 and 2015, as you noted, Blake, gravel racing was really starting to take off. I first wrote about gravel racing, I believe, in 2003 or 2004. I don't remember the exact year that the Trans-Iowa race started, but that's when I first heard about it. I'd been fascinated by it for a long time as someone who'd grown up in the Midwest and really wanted to jump into it. I did my first Unbound 100, which became an Unbound, I think like 140 because of a wrong turn on the course. In 2013, 2014, Blake and I went and did the race together and finished second. And we covered that in a previous episode. And then we were going back in 2015. Our goal this time was definitely to win. And I would say gravel was becoming a real phenomenon within the world of cycling. It was clearly the direction things were headed. Many people were now very interested in this genre of racing, and we knew that it was going to be more competitive than it was highly competitive all of the years that we were there. But this year in particular, it really had started to peak and things were starting to change. And, in future years, on the other side of 2015, some of the people who won the Unbound 100 were riders who are national and world champions. People like Stephen Hyde won in 2021, who is a former U.S. cyclocross national champion. In 2019, Ashton Lambie, who's a world record holder, world champion, and also winner of numerous gravel events and other events, was the winner of the race. So as time went on, it got more and more competitive. But in 2015, this shift was definitely starting to happen, which is part of what we experienced when we actually got to the race. Another thing that was different this year, my future wife, Molly, did not come with us this year. We went by ourselves. The previous year, because Unbound is an unsupported race and you need someone to hand you water, food at the aid station, which comes in the middle of the 100-mile race. So what I had done, because I had a relationship with Chris Carmichael and Carmichael Training Systems, and Chris generously hooked us up and put us in their support program. So the CTS team was able to provide us, we were able to give them our support bags to take to the halfway point the day before the race, which we'll get to in a bit. But so we were just like rolling a slightly different setup this year. And so, yeah, we got to Kansas City. And I remember one of the first things that we did, in the spirit of being totally dialed in, I would say it's interesting for me, having met, interviewed, ridden with, spent time with a lot of the world's top professional athletes now. I think one of the things that makes them world-class at what they do is that over time they become nervous or stressed out at the appropriate moments in competition and never before that moment. And Blake, as you know, like I'm just, historically, I've been a nervous wreck when I go compete in bike races, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's the funniest thing, because if you could just get a full night's sleep before a race, I think that you'd be able to perform so much better than you did in these events. But you would be up till 4 a.m, like changing your saddle position or like checking your tire pressure and all of that stuff. And then when you finally wind down, it's like, okay, cool, we have 3 hours left to sleep. Just quickly, like night and day. So the year, the first year we did this, it was very DIY. I mean, and even compared to where the Unbound is now, it's, what we were doing looks like the Ice Ages. But the fact that Chris Carmichael even had a training program and was even there set up is a huge testament to be like, wow, like people are really taking this seriously. And it sounds funny because of how big it is now, but even then we're like, oh my God, Chris Carmichael's going to be there. That's crazy. So yeah. And I remember, when you told me that you had this connection, I was like starstruck, because, I had known of him from, his whole history. And I was like, I can't believe that he's going to be at this event. So yeah, night and day between the 2 years.
Yeah. And you're right. So that year, Carmichael Training Systems has training camps to prepare riders for big events. And then with Unbound that year, they had an actual program where they had coaches there, they had support staff, and they were working with athletes who had trained through CTS to actually do the event, which was, we'll get to that in a moment, because we got to sit in on their pre-race briefing, which was pretty cool. And going back to kind of that obsessive approach and obsessive attention to detail, which I have always had, maybe to a degree that's not healthy when preparing my equipment and myself and my nutrition for races. This year, one of the things that we did was we brought all of our food with us to Emporia from Kansas City. So I remember we went grocery shopping in Kansas City. We bought some chicken breasts or something, made rice, and had some veg. I think we bought a salad to go with it from somewhere else, and had cooked everything, had it in coolers. And we did all of this, number one, because the previous year when we had gone to Unbound, our only food option was fast food or Applebee's, and Applebee's is actually pretty delicious. I mean, like when those, that's your range of choices, it's totally fine. But, we wanted to have a little bit more control over our pre-race meals. And again, from my experience with high-level professional athletes now, I know that a lot of them, they're really dialed with their nutrition, but if they show up and Applebee's is what they have to eat, it's like, oh, okay, they go to Applebee's and then they race the next day. But what we tried to do was control what we could as much as possible, and that meant preparing our own food. And it was both for ensuring that we could have the macronutrients that we knew we would perform best with, and it was also to avoid food poisoning. So like that's the other thing. Like we didn't want to eat food that we definitely didn't want to eat, like group food or buffet style food, and we didn't want to go to a restaurant because there was the chance that, I mean, you never know. Like sometimes you end up getting sick, and of course you can also get sick when you prepare your own food. Foreshadowing. But yeah, so we had our own food, and then we rolled into Emporia. Another big difference this year was that the previous 2 years I had stayed at, and then Blake, you also had stayed at, we just got like a little motel room right outside of Emporia. Again, the race had become incredibly popular in 2015. This was like the thing that everybody in the cycling world wanted to do, and it's an even bigger deal today. But at that moment in time, pretty much couldn't find anywhere to stay. And it's not as though the motel accommodations the previous year were luxurious. In fact, I remember our neighbors in 2014 were having a party at like 5 p.m. when we got there. They had multiple cases of Keystone Light pizzas. Like they were going hard for quite a while. But in 2015, there was nowhere to stay in Emporia, and the option was to stay in dormitories at the college that's there. So that's what we elected to do.
Yeah, and you're spending 8 hours. You're going there to sleep, maybe 10 hours if you count the shower afterwards. So we weren't being too fancy about it. And to be honest, like the least amount of distraction, which is what we had. We had a cinder block sort of room with 2 cots and a desk. So the accommodations were sparse, but appropriate for what the task at hand, really help you dial in mentally.
Yeah, and I wish I could say that in those sparse conditions that I slept like a newborn child, or I slept deeply. Instead, we got there. We went to the Carmichael Training Systems pre-race dinner event. They had dinner for the athletes in their program, and I remember they generously offered to let us like partake in their dinner. I thought, hey, we're being super pro here. We've brought our own and prepared our own food to avoid any chance of any kind of contamination, or perhaps one of our opponents slipping some type of poison into our provisions. Wouldn't want anything to happen the night before the big race. But at that event, we handed off, I believe, our supply bags for the next day for the drop point, and they briefed us on the race. We, of course, had done it before, but we listened. And another thing that's springing to mind for me here, Blake, is in 2014, it was a dry edition of the race. The week of Unbound 100 in 2015, there had been severe storms leading up to the race. And before departing from California, one of the decisions we had to make was, are we going to run road shoes or are we going to run mountain bike shoes? Because I believe in 2014, I believe that I ran road shoes, if I recall correctly, and it was totally fine. And, like a little bit higher power transfer, probably like slightly more aero. But, we knew that, okay, it's probably going to be wet. We didn't know how would that translate on the course. This is gravel after all, not necessarily dirt. But that was one of the other things that was kind of on our mind the night before, that there were probably going to be some variables out on the course that we'd encounter that we hadn't encountered the previous year.
Yeah, I mean, when we came into Emporia, you were seeing guys and gals who had, and non-binary folks, running through town who had just, sampled the course, who've been staying in Emporia maybe all week to get ready for the race. And just the look of hopelessness on their face and the amount of just peanut butter mud that their bikes and their legs were caked in. You could tell that the conditions were so different, and it was mentally breaking people before the event even started. And one of the most critical pieces of intel that we had that, this is not an endorsement for Carmichael Training Systems, but in that pre-race meeting, Chris had already gone out with his crew and kind of done some pre-rides on on the conditions that we were going to be riding in. And he was just like, look, it is really muddy. Like it's a mud trot. And there are, two pieces of advice that he gave us. The first one was get a stick or a screwdriver and tuck it into the bottom of your bike shorts. And as you roll through the mud, lean over and scrape the layer of mud off of the top of your tires. Because if you don't do that, it's so sticky that it's going to build up, and it's going to, your wheels are going to be unmovable after, a few miles of this stuff. So every time you hit that. And the second piece of advice that he gave us is if it looks muddy, don't ride it. Like, get off, hop over, and do a flying dismount, cyclocross dismount, and then run through the mud and then remount. Because what's going to happen is you're going to go through that mud. You're going to stop anyways. You're going to end up hiking because the mud is so thick and nasty. And then you're going to get on the other side and you're going to have to dig all of that mud out of everything just to get your bike literally functioning enough again to ride it. Like, that's how bad the mud was. So people, like I said, when we went into Emporia, it was a different vibe from the year before. People were already broken before the race started.
Blake, it's kind of bringing to mind for me one of my favorite pieces of content that you've made about when you were on the road and you went into a gym that you hadn't trained in before. And pardon me if my nomenclature isn't right here, if gym isn't the right word, but you went to another jiu-jitsu facility and someone who was there just started throwing the flying triangle on you, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
So, I mean, this mud was ready to give you a flying triangle. It was going to omoplata you until your elbow was snapped off. It was going to be a bad scene. It, as Blake described, it was like, going outside and making a snow person is just like the mud just stuck to itself and rolled and rolled and rolled until you would have a mud pile of immense, size on your tire such that your bicycle would no longer roll. This was the feedback we were getting from Chris, right?
Yeah.
And we went out and we got screwdrivers. I think we went to Walgreens.
Walgreens or CVS, and we got screwdrivers that night, tiny ones. And honestly, whatever, we'll get into it. But that was one of the most solid pieces of advice. And it's Chris Carmichael, this guy's his experience. And he's like, yeah, you're going to want to get a screwdriver, scrape the mud off your tires. That's your expert advice. Thanks, bro. And it ended up being it was a clutch little nugget there.
Yeah, it was our saving grace for sure. And yeah, so we left that pre-race meeting. I think I definitely felt incredibly nervous. And again, we'd put half a year really into preparing for this event. And as we covered in the previous episode, and I'll drop the link in the show notes to that, in 2014, we came so close to winning the race, but ended up getting destroyed by David Wilson, Kansas City, Missouri. Shout out, David. Great job. And, we wanted to go back and win. And there was just this sense of this is going to be beyond our reach soon. And it's funny, I'm certainly not Colin Strickland, and Blake, you have a lot of great qualities as a human being and an athlete, but you certainly aren't on Colin Strickland's level as an athlete. But I heard him on a podcast recently talking about Red Hook and Unbound. He's a winner of both multiple Red Hook events and, of course, of the Unbound race. And he said, hey, I like riding my bike about 10 hours a week. And if I have to do more than that, then I kind of want to find a different genre of cycling where I can just show up and win, because I don't actually want to train more than 10 hours a week. And Colin, if you're listening and I'm paraphrasing you incorrectly, I'm sorry, but I don't think I am. I think that's what you actually said. And this race, I felt like we were at the actual very limits of our ability. We had trained more or less like professional athletes for a half a year. We had discarded every other aspect of our life. And for me at the time, I'm trying to do some math. How old was I? I was getting on in years. I didn't feel like I had many, we can all get better over time. And I believe at any age you can do great. But also there is a certain physiological window at which, as an endurance athlete, you can reach your absolute peak. I was within that window, and the window was closing, and I knew this was going to get harder and harder and harder to win this specific event. And then, a couple years later, you have Ashton Lambie, world record holder in the 5,000 meter pursuit, showing up. So yeah, this was it. This was the moment. We were ready to go. And how did you feel the night before the race, Blake?
I had a migraine. I had a really bad headache. And I like whatever. And here's the thing. It was like a dehydration stress headache. And I feel like I'm like, this is a Chris Carmichael Training Systems like selling pitch, but he had given us like these like carb electrolyte drinks beforehand for the night before. And I had that drink and like, it was like, oh, I'm like severely dehydrated and stressed out, and probably, my glucose levels are really low. And that drink like literally like cured my migraine in that moment, whatever. And then I slept like a baby. I slept great. But up until that, I was like so stressed out about it. But yeah, that drink was awesome.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember what the drink was. I don't remember which brand Carmichael Training Systems was using at the time, but it more or less
salt and sugar.
Yeah. Scratch makes a drink like it. So does, you can get Gator Lights, which is the Gatorade product that's like this, but it's a pre-hydration mix that has, it'll have as much sodium and magnesium, potassium. It's like 5 times as much as you would have in a normal sport drink. And the idea is that by drinking that in advance of an event like the one we were about to do, you go in pre-hydrated and you're less likely to deplete your electrolytes, which would have very deleterious effects if you deplete your electrolytes during the course of an event that's this intense. So luckily for Blake, as is always the case, Blake and I have done many of these punishing events together, and I truly love Blake as a human being. He's been a fantastic friend. I feel lucky to know him. And I'll say that one thing I've always resented about Blake is that when we would go to do these events, he would just like go right to sleep. This is no problem. So like Blake hops in bed, he goes to sleep at like 9:30, and I mean it's like a cartoon. This guy is just like lights out. It was like there were little logs getting sawed above his head. As for me, I ate my meal a bit late. I remember I was out in like the common hangout area in the dorm, and I foam rolled, I ate a bit, and I think I had a couple sips of Coca-Cola, which of course had some caffeine. I don't know what I was doing, but I thought this isn't going to do anything. I'm going to go right to sleep. And I then tried to go to bed. I took my ZMA, which I was taking every night at the time and still take. I couldn't fall asleep. And, I think that this goes back to you part of being high performance or a high performer is being highly adaptable in stochastic environments that are varied, where you don't have that much control over what's going on. And as much as we tried to control everything, I wasn't used to sleeping on this particular bed, which, that probably says something horrible about me as a human being, that I couldn't just like rough it out on this like basically cot in this cinder block dorm. And the other thing that I really noticed this year, and surely we had noticed it the previous year, even though now that I'm thinking about it, I also may have forgotten my silicone earplugs, and I had like some toilet paper shoved in my ears, but there was a train that was like a quarter mile from this dorm. It was a freight train, and it wasn't one freight train. I feel like every 20 minutes there was a freight train passing through Emporia, and I wasn't used to that, right? And it was like,
that's right, yeah. Well, right? Because when you cross, there's a feeling when you do this event, when you cross the train tracks, when you know that you're almost done, right? And so now that you mention it, it's like, oh yeah, obviously, like the train tracks for us are like the indicator that like this event is almost, we're like coming up to the finish line. But that means that we were sleeping, a quarter mile away from train tracks that were having freight shipped across all night long. Yeah, I totally forgot about that.
Yeah. So I couldn't sleep, and I got into one of those loops where the more I thought about the fact that I wasn't sleeping, the more wound up that I got, I tried stretching out. I took a hot shower, just all the things that one would typically do to become more relaxed. And my resentment for Blake grew deeper and deeper throughout this period of time. And I think that I woke you up a couple of times unintentionally. And I think you were pretty pissed off because I was entering and exiting the dorm room over and over because I couldn't sleep. And I think finally, maybe around 4 or 4:30, I fell asleep for like an hour and a half. And then we got up and it was race day. I more or less now hadn't slept or whatever. I'd had an hour of pretty bad sleep, but whatever, I was like, okay, it's time to do this. We've been preparing for half a year. Let's go. Now, how did you feel that morning when you woke up, Blake?
I felt good. I felt cold. It was colder at the start of the race than it was in previous years. I remember this because I walked up we rode up to the finish line, got our spot, rode up the start line, got our spot. And I was like shivering, and he looked over at me, and I remember you saying, he was serious, he said, man, you need to eat a cheeseburger. Because I was like thin, like chattering, like I couldn't keep my hands still on and that's like nerves. And it was cold, but pre-race again, like I felt good. I felt like we had everything ready to go. I felt rested as you could be. Yeah.
Yeah. I felt terrible. I was exhausted. I was completely frazzled. And yeah, we did do the Davis Finney move, which my coach had told me about. My coach, David Brenton, who's also been on this podcast, who's my first coach. My coach when I did Unbound this year was Tucker Olander, who's a fantastic coach. But the first cycling coach I had in LA, David Brenton, who was a cycling icon and was a pro racer during the Davis Finney era, told me that when Davis Finney would do criteriums, when everybody would get lined up, he would like ride the course backwards and then just ride to the front where everyone was lined up and then like back into the front row.
And honestly, like we did this like at cyclocross races for years. We did this in mountain bike races. Like this was the move. Yeah. And there's a ton of guys out there who are probably like those assholes. But
yeah,
it's a race. It's not a fun. And so you do what you need to do within the rules to get your place. And honestly, at Unbound, like this is a race over 100 plus miles. That start position, if that start position makes or breaks your day, there are some other things you probably should have worked on.
I will say though that I do think your start position can make or break your day at Unbound. And part of the deal is you do have a lot of people. It is the dichotomy of gravel racing and the great debate about the spirit of gravel. But you have people there who are there to race. Blake and I were there. We came to get down. We were there to race. And then you have people who are there to participate and they just want to have a good time and finish and then drink some beer. Personally, I feel like, hey, you could just go drink some beer. Or you could ride your bike and go drink some beer, and either one's totally cool. And so anyway, you have this mix of people, which is part of what makes these events so cool. And you don't want to have to weave your way through 500 or 1,000 people to try to get to the part of the event, the front of the event, if you're actually trying to compete. So we were at the front that day, and I will say we got there on time. So this was a big improvement over some of our previous efforts, where there have been some timing errors getting to venues in unfamiliar locations, but we were dialed. Like, we got there on time. We had used the bathroom an appropriate amount of times in the morning, which for anybody who races bikes or probably runs, that can be like a bit of a deal. You don't want to start with any extra weight. And it was a cold morning, and then it was time to go. And the atmosphere is definitely electric. I have participated in a lot of events, but like, how would you describe the atmosphere there on Main Street in Emporia, Blake, at the start of the Unbound?
This year was, again, keep saying it's bigger than the year before, but there's a magic to Emporia that everybody hears about, where the town comes out and lines the streets. There are athletes there from literally all over the world who've trained and traveled to be there for this moment. And for most folks, for a lot of folks that day, this is the big bucket list item in their cycling, world. Like, most folks aren't trying to win this event. Most folks are just excited to be able to partake in the world's premier gravel event. And you can feel it. It's so exciting to be on that line in any capacity that day, shoving off to do this giant bucket list event.
And then it started. And the way this race starts, you're on Main Street, and I'd have to go look at the power file, but I feel like it's maybe between 4 and 6 minutes. You were on a road, and we were riding on the bumper of the police escort, whatever the vehicle was that started. We were just like drafting on the bumper of this thing to save some watts. And then things like kick off, the car accelerates, and like very quickly, that's when the racing starts, which is immediately in the Unbound 100. I have not done the Unbound 200, so I don't know what goes down there. But the deal is, after about 4 to 6 minutes, you take a right-hand turn onto gravel. It's chunky gravel, and it's more or less double track, which means the spots that where a car's wheels would go on either side of a gravel road, they're kind of like burned in lines, and you want to be in one of those lines. So you basically have people riding double file, hundreds and hundreds of riders, and it's almost impossible to pass at that point, because if you go into the middle to ride on the crown of the road, Emporia is in the Flint Hills of Kansas. If you're familiar with Flint, it's a sharp stone and it can slash your tires. So you don't want to go out into the middle. You want to stay in the more compacted area of the double tracks. And you also, it had rained, as we said, in the week leading up to the event. What that translated to when we were out there, that means that you have mud flying up into your face and mouth as you're riding. You have to pay extra attention to traction. Also, there's some potholes that are concealed. Like, there might be a puddle that has a giant gaping hole in the bottom of it, ready to swallow your wheel, break your rim, and throw you off the bike. And your water bottles are getting covered in muck and slime. And these are areas where there's a lot of ranching and cattle in these areas, and that means there's a lot of cow shit. And that has a lot of bacteria in it. And so you need to be careful. And this year, we were both running bottles for this distance of the event. I think we were both we had 1 liter size bottles, like 1 in each cage on the bike and then 1 in the jersey. So that's 3 bottles total. And then we would swap for 3 fresh bottles at the rest stop at at 55 or 60 miles. But that first hour of the race, once you get onto that double track, it's all out for over an hour. Like, it's as hard as any race I've ever done. And looking at the power files, it's pretty much maxed out. It's like, for me, that was about as hard as I could ride for 1 hour. And you're just hanging on. How did it feel for you?
Yeah, I mean, like that. I am not a technically skilled rider, as you may have, as evidenced by my history as a triathlete that we talked about earlier. And so for me, it's terrifying because we've been training a ton. You know, we race cyclocross. Andy and I have done a bunch of other, events that are similar to this, but you're going so fast on gravel, and it's wet. I'm from California, where we don't have a ton of mud. It's really new and uncomfortable, and it's scary when this stuff gets kicked off of a wheel and hits you like right in the face, and your mouth is full of like dirt. It's a different experience. So yeah, I was scared, honestly. But part of the deal with being friends with Andy for so long is, I'm like, well, if I could just stay with him, with him, I think we're going to be okay. He seems to be doing okay. And, all I have to do is be able to stick with you. And so, yeah, I kind of had that mental attitude. But yeah, I mean, that first hour, we talked about this in the last episode, but that first hour is just so sketchy. And what happens is, we mentioned this in the last episode, but the 200 race, actually, since it's a longer race, kicks off before the 100. So one of the things you have to deal with as you start the 100, especially in that first hour, is you catch the people on the tail end of the 200 race. And so imagine being, going at this breakneck speed and passing people who are literally like at the very, very back of a race that's twice as long. So it's they're basically standing still compared to how fast you're going. I guess, if there were another character in this event that we've already kind of talked about, it would probably have to be the mud. Like, the mud itself was like another competitor that we had to fight against, I feel like. And I remember us pace lining full speed, 25 miles an hour, and then watching as riders literally like rode up until their bottom bracket into mud and then toppled off the side of their bike, like in front of us. Like it was like a cartoon. And us being like, oh, this is it. This is the mud section. And you and I, doing our cool, flying dismounts, cyclocross ready, like great, shoulder our bikes, run up the first hill thinking like, we're like sprinting, like this is going to be it. This is like our guys are falling back. We're going to make our move right now. Like, while these guys start dealing with the mud, we already prepared for this. Carmichael gave us the tip, and like we run to the top of the hill. And then as far as we can see, it's just people walking their bikes because the mud is so bad that the road is unrideable. And just the terrible feeling inside, being like, oh, this is going to be a really long day.
It was a horrible sinking feeling. And Blake, I think people far too often analogize sport to actual warfare, and they are not actual analogous things. But one of the feelings that I had in that moment is, first of all, like, I felt pretty good. Like, even though I had a very bad night of sleep, you were riding strong. I knew we were prepared. We knew that there was going to be this moment involving getting off our bikes and dealing with the mud. And up until then, it's like at this point, we were over an hour into the race, and we were doing great. Like, we kept an eye on everybody who was fast off the line. And there was one person in particular that we'll talk about more in a moment here. His name is Austin Morris, and he was riding for the American Classic Elite Gravel team. Again, things had changed this year at the Unbound 100, and he was part of an actual elite team of racers who were just focused on these gravel events, and they were riding as a team within the event. And, we could tell, like, okay, this person is very fast and we're keeping an eye on him, but whatever, like we were wheel to wheel, like we were all together going into this initial section after an hour for me at around like 335, 340 watts average power. Like we were riding very, very hard going into this. So we hit the mud, as Blake noted. It was like an actual like mud bog. There was no getting around this. There was no, well, if you just like go over to the edge of the road, it's going to be a little firmer. Like, no. And as soon as we hit the mud, like everyone else, as Blake said, we charged up to the top of that hill. And then looking at this rolling terrain, as far as the eye could see, yeah, it was just this stream of people. And Game of Thrones was really popular at the time. And this is going back to that war analogy. And I kept thinking about, this is like one of those scenes in Game of Thrones where they show an army marching somewhere and it just goes on infinitely, because I don't know how many people were actually on that road, but it looked like over 1,000 people in front of us, because we started after the 200. So we're riding into the back of the 200 field, and all of these people are barely moving. And it was so gnarly. Their bikes were freaking covered in mud. And this wasn't like light, thin mud. This wasn't even peanut butter. This was clay. This was ferrous soil, like thick slabs of red clay on their bicycles. And I couldn't believe it, because like I got my screwdriver out, and at this point we had to make this decision of like, do we carry our bikes? Do we push them? Do we kind of elevate them on the side of the road and push them? Like, what do we do? What's the best technique? And I certainly was not doing much, if any, running in the lead up to this event. Blake is a big secret trainer, probably still today. And at that time, while he was a retired triathlete and a duathlete, I have this feeling he may still have been doing some running on the side.
Yeah, I wasn't afraid of the prospect that we might have to run a few hundred yards. I thought that would, we'd be okay.
Yeah. So Blake had probably, on top of the 20 hours of riding a bike a week, he probably secretly been doing like multiple 7-mile runs every week. That would be my guess. I think I'm probably right.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong.
Okay.
Yeah. And like one thing that people should know about you is that Andy is like, you can ride it. Like he has the confidence about something where he's like, no, you don't need to walk your bike. Like you can ride that. Like, and he is like, we're on a bike ride. We're not on a bike walk. Like you're going to ride it. And he's pushed me throughout all the years we've ridden together to just like, okay, man, like it's a little technical, but just stay on your bike. Like it's okay. If you're on your bike, it'll go faster. Like it might, you might get bumped a little bit, but you'll feel better about trying to ride it. And there was no part of him that was like, oh, we're going to ride this section. It was like viewed no desire to try and ride through this mud.
It was terrible. It was an awful experience. And I also have reflected on, had I been there alone, what would my experience have been like? Because, cycling it's an individual sport, really, ultimately, although it's also a team sport. We weren't a team per se, but we did approach this in a cooperative fashion. Like we'd done all this training together. I think, it's part of what has brought us really close as friends. Like we've gotten to have all of these amazing experiences that, there might be a handful of other people in our lives that do similar things who could understand the bond that we have from doing these, like truly, like putting ourselves in these truly horrible, I mean, granted, they're manufactured artificial positions of being uncomfortable, but we've done these things together that are horribly uncomfortable, that most rational people would never subject themselves to, that we actually find to be really interesting, fun, and a way to get to have fun with our friends and to have growthful experiences as people, I think. And in that moment, I actually had a mantra that I had been using throughout training leading up to this event, because I often had moments in 2014 and 2013 where I would hit a point in my training, or both in gravel races and sometimes in cyclocross, where I would just think, what the fuck am I doing? Like, why am I doing this right now? Like, some people are just like whatever, they're going to watch a football game today and drink a beer, and I'm going to go do this to myself for 8 hours. Like, what the fuck is wrong with me? And I just realized that this is actually what I'm drawn to and enjoy doing in some way. And when I would have some of these nagging thoughts, I would just tell myself, when the question was, why are you doing this? The answer that I had in my head was, because this is what I'm doing right now. And I just kept telling myself that over and over. I wasn't prepared to run at all. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure I had run to prepare for cyclocross season the previous year. And I'm not, this like sounds a bit overwrought. Like, we paid money and had the privilege and to have leisure time to put time and money into going and doing this manufactured challenge. But on the other hand, in the moment, like it was like quite a difficult thing. It wasn't what we expected. And I think part of what was really unique about this specific aspect of the challenge is we had no idea when the mud would stop. So it was for an unknown time and distance. And again, because of the rolling nature of the terrain, you would like get to the crest of a hill, and going back to this like Game of Thrones army analogy, over and over and over, because each hill was probably, I'm going to say, like 3 to 5 minutes between peaks and valleys. So you'd get back up to a peak. And I remember thinking, I really just like, please God, let this be the last hill. And like this next one, like we're getting back on the bike. And every time it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was just more, it was more mud. And at this point, I mean, I'm not making this up. Over ankle deep mud. My bike had to weigh at least 50 pounds. And then there was do I just push my bike? Do I pick it up? Like, what do I do?
And like, it's a distance that you can't say, okay, we're going to just trot through this. We're going to sprint through this. We're going to walk through this, because you have no idea how long it's going to go on for. And I don't think anybody there at that event, or a small percentage, was mentally prepared for this. And so as we're going in our little race, we're seeing people who are in the beginning of their 200-mile day broken. These folks are just demoralized and bummed out. And then there's some people that are smiling and having a great time, and like, this is the thing that they signed up for. But, for a lot of it, people are like, oh man, there are people that have already torn off their derailleurs. Like, it's this already, and they're just trying to get to the aid station so that they can bail on their day. So one thing that was really helpful, if you've been friends with Andrew for any period of time, you likely have some sort of inside joke with him. And so we have plenty after years of doing this. And so I think we're on different sides of the road at this point. Like, I think I'm on the left side and you're on the right side, and we're running up the grass sides of it because that was like the most stable. And we're just yelling and singing these stupid inside jokes at each other as we're going over the hill. And people are looking at us like we're so crazy. And it was a reminder for me as we're doing that like, I'm here with my friend. Like, you can't, any game plan we have is out the window. And I'm just here with my friend doing this thing that we do for fun. This is just like any Saturday or just like any cyclocross race. Like, we're just out here having a good time. And again, like you said, I don't know what this experience would be like without, having a friend there. Like, it wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have gone through that mud section. I would have gone to the next section of the road and probably ridden home. So yeah, that was a huge, I just remember PMA, positive mental attitude being like the biggest differentiator between people who, when we got to the end of that mud, people who were able to hit the ground running, and people who were like, okay, that was my day. I'm just going to survive today. And
it went on for a long time.
3 miles,
right?
3 miles. Yeah. If I look at my Strava from the day, I see that is a stretch where we were going like less than 5 miles an hour, more like, 2 and 3 miles an hour for, about 3 miles.
And so we were running or on foot, I believe, for over 45 minutes, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So we'd ridden, to recap at this point, hadn't slept all night. Blake had slept like a baby, was daisy fresh, and was ready to rock, although a bit cold at the start. We drilled it as hard as we could for over an hour, had a clean first hour, didn't wreck, didn't have any mechanicals, get into the mud, and then we're on foot for almost an hour, right? And that's part of what, we covered this a bit, but part of what was tricky was trying to calibrate at what pace do we proceed, not knowing how long this will last for. And if I recall correctly, we ran, like we actually like jogged or ran the entire time.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember that one of the thoughts that I had was maybe this will break off some of the people who were able to ride really hard because maybe mentally they're not strong enough and they're just going to give up right now. So maybe this is one of those leverage points when we can impose our will or the environment can impose its will on our competitors and make them quit.
Mentally, that's what I was hoping for. Yeah. And we were losing people for sure. Like we were losing people in that top group and I was like, okay, cool. Like just keep singing stupid songs with Andrew and we're going to get through this in a great mood. We're going to hit, a rideable section and it's going to be over. Like it's going to be great.
And then we get back on our bikes. And one of the first things that I notice is that Austin Morris is there with us and his pro team kid. And we got on his wheel and he was riding really, really fast.
It was humiliating. Like as soon as we got off the mud, I was like, surely we're going to have a moment to regroup. Everybody's going to check their bike, and then we're going to leave in a gentlemanly sportsman type fashion to continue with the event. And he was like ruthless. I think he was running slicks too. I don't even think he was running like knobby tires. And he just got down, put his bike down, like dusted it off, and took off. And I was like, well, looks like we're going right now. And he was riding so hard, dude.
Yeah, he was riding incredibly fast, and we had to make a decision at that point. Can this person keep it up? Like, is he going to be able to sustain this seemingly totally insane pace? And again, I remember sitting on his wheel and we were doing like around 400 watts for like 3 or 4 minutes. And I was like, I know that I can't ride this hard for too long and it's pretty early in the race. So what are we going to do here? And I think it was around that point, I think we got to around 35 miles into the race. I could be wrong. I'd have to check the route again. But that's the point at which you hit the actual, there's a river crossing. There's no way to get around it. It's sometimes knee deep or deeper. I remember coming out of the other side of that. And I don't know why, but Blake, I remember you being slightly behind me, if memory serves me correctly.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I don't think you like got dropped. Maybe you just, I don't know why. But whatever. We came out of the other side of the river. I got back on Austin Morris's wheel and he just drilled it like right back to 400 watts. I mean, clearly he knew what he was doing. I don't know if he perceived me or us as an actual threat, but at that point, like he was throwing down and I just decided I can't actually continue to do this. And that's also when I started to realize there's a lot of adrenaline in that first hour to 2 hours of the race. It must have worn off somewhere in the middle of running through ankle deep mud with a 50-pound bike for an hour. But at this point, the adrenaline was, it was just like back to, okay, like this is my fitness and experience carrying me here, of which I have relatively little. And I couldn't hold on. And I thought, I was just hoping like, hopefully this person can't continue to ride for this long and they'll totally blow up. And he was on a felt road bike with rim brakes. And you know what a big rim brake fan I am. It was like inconceivable to me though, that in the conditions we were on, that someone was riding like a rim brake bike with slicks and not getting flats. Also,
and aero bars.
Did he have aero bars?
Yeah, he had aero bars.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, chapeau to Austin for having the foresight to run it. We should have been running aero bars. I didn't think about it, but this was before the great aero bar arms race. And also Austin probably, I was walking around at probably like 185, 190 pounds at the time, and like a lean 185, 190. Austin looked to me like he was probably 115, 120. Which is probably why he could ride slick road tires in that environment. Because I would have just like popped the tires and broken the wheels.
And all that weight was below the waist. Like the dude was like, he looked like a a bike rider. Handsome guy, handsome fella, but definitely, a bike rider. And we look like athletic dudes who ride bikes.
He was a machine. He was
Yeah.
he was definitely the Drago of this Rocky 3 story, and he was punching hard. He was breaking the punchometer, and he punched right off. And then from there, things get a little bit hazy for me. Things start to go into a very, very dark, painful place for me, but not like the normal, this bike ride got hard. Something just started to feel really weird. How were you feeling at that point in time?
Honestly, yeah, I felt good. I felt good the whole time, and I didn't even know that anything was going on with you. I had no idea. You were taking hard pulls, and we were working together as a team. Everything was going as planned, and you kind of mentioned like, oh, and I'm like, well, yeah, but we always kind of feel, like this is hard. I remember at some point in this mix, we did get passed by a couple of people. And I didn't know. I like it was evident. I was like, oh no, like this year is different. Like people are passing us. We can't hold on to this guy. Like some of that stuff was happening. But yeah, other than that, I felt great, man. I didn't even notice that you weren't feeling it.
What happened from there? A lot of it's just disappeared in my mind, honestly.
So
and I'll get into like what was going on with me, and it took a while to kind of figure it out. But
yeah, well, I mean, what happened from there? Everything was smooth, man. We went into transition. Transition was really slick. Again, this is like an infomercial for Carmichael, but having a professional support team with you in the aid station. Not that, I mean, Molly, Andy's wife, who wasn't his wife at the time, she was an awesome support. But we had to kind of change our own bottles and get our drinks and do all of that stuff. And when you have these pros that like come in and they clean your bike off a little bit, they hand you your snacks, they hand you your stuff, and then you just go. It's such a smooth operation. So we went through there really smooth. And then what was cool is that we were passing guys pretty regularly who had passed us and who had thought that they could solo ride to a finish. And so we were, and they were just sitting up, like standing still, basically. Like they were moving that slow. They were like that broken, that they had tried to drill it so hard and blown so much energy that they had totally not anticipated how challenging a solo ride to the front would be and to the finish would be. And for me, that was so reassuring because I was like, surely Austin is going to be one of these guys. Because we saw, I think we passed 3 guys that were just totally broken. And we figured out oh, we're in it. Like we're probably top 3, top 4. We could do this. So all we have to do is catch Austin. So yeah, I remember that being really reassuring. And then we rode and, finished the event.
And a few things happened before we got to the end of the event. And one of the things that happened was leading up to that aid station, as I mentioned, my nutrition this year, I basically was eating King's Hawaiian rolls, and I forget what my protocol was, but I was trying to get in around probably 75, 80 grams of carb per hour. That meant eating 4 of these little sandwiches, I think. So every 15 minutes, I would watch my computer, and every 15 minutes, whether I felt like it or not, and no matter what the train was, I'd have to shove one of these things in my mouth and eat it. And because it was so muddy and we were so covered in slop and mud, my technique was I would store the sandwiches, which I think I had wrapped in foil to make them easier to get in and out versus a baggie. But I had the sandwiches shoved into my bento box. My bento box was just soaked in mud, and so were my jersey pockets. And that meant that I was eating whatever was coming off the road and was in the mud was in my sandwiches, and I was ingesting that. And not to mention it was getting in my eyes and my nose and my mouth and whatever. So this is part of my hypothesis about where things went for me over the course of this race. Because as I mentioned, there are a lot of cattle. This is rangeland. So I think I was probably ingesting some microbes that I ideally didn't want to have in my system, and definitely not at a point of really high stress to my immune system, having not slept and now, putting myself through this manufactured physical distress that we were encountering. So what I I was just trying to like hold on to Blake and to take some pulls, rotate. As you mentioned, we had some people pass us. That was really dispiriting, but I didn't feel good, but I kind of kept going back to this mantra of, you know, this is what I'm doing right now. Like, why am I doing this? Because this is what I'm doing right now. And we put so much time and money into being in this moment at this place at this moment in time, that I just tried to do the best that I could do. I knew from looking at my power meter, my power was way lower than it had been in training. And I knew something was really wrong, because like I didn't feel good. And as the event went on, my appetite really started to decrease. Like I was forcing myself to eat and drink, but I no longer felt hungry, which I think for anyone, but for me in particular, it wasn't excessively hot. I think it was actually like relatively cool that day. I think it was it was cooler than the previous year. So it was like probably like 65, 70 degrees. And so heat wasn't a factor. I couldn't eat. I didn't feel like eating. I had no energy. I couldn't ride hard. And I was just like out of my head and just trying to focus on whatever the next signpost was, or whatever the next visible horizon was. Just like get to that point, and try not to get a flat. And we didn't talk about this, but this was also the first year that a tubeless tire was introduced for gravel. I believe it was the Specialized, might have been the Tracer was the tire, but I remember I considered they had like a booth in the expo area, and I was like, oh, should I switch to tubeless tires? I was like, no, you should never switch equipment like the day before a race. Equally, I knew that it would be like a real advantage, because we were running Clement MSO Explorers 700 by 40s, and we were running them around like 50 PSI. So basically rock hard, gigantic tires. I mean, that made them difficult to flat, but it also meant we just didn't have much traction.
Yeah, and uncomfortable, right? Like
very
tires
uncomfortable.
Your first line of suspension. It was like, oh man. Especially, I think we were both riding carbon bikes. It was pretty rigid. Yeah, man. So, I mean, we could talk about from there. It was like clockwork. For me, it was like everything that we had trained. And so I felt really good. And you're never really quite sure where you are in this race, but we thought we were in like the top, whatever. We knew that this kid was in front of us. And then we crossed the finish line, I believe, holding hands, which was lovely. Or at least side by side, right next to each other. And then we find out that we did not win. In fact, we placed second and third for the second year in a row. Yeah. How did that feel?
I mean, personally, I knew we lost. I knew that we weren't going to win the event. I knew that, I mean, you don't know, because you don't know where anyone is in the race. It's not like somebody's giving you an update. Nobody really knows where anyone is in the race. But there's always the chance that, I don't know, maybe the person in front of you got a flat, maybe they quit the race, maybe they had a mechanical. Not that you want any of these things to happen, but also you kind of do want them to happen because you want to win. But that is not what actually happened. And I think you're forgetting one important detail, Blake. So as you come back into Emporia, you have a very long run south over these rollers for about 15 miles. Then you start to jog over to the east, and then it's kind of like east south, and then you get onto this last little stretch of gravel that curves back into town. You're within sight of Emporia, and at that point you're going to get back on the road. So as we're on this last piece of gravel, and again, this goes back to, I knew something was like really, really wrong with me. I was able to pedal, and at this point we're over 6 hours into the race, maybe 6.5 hours, and I had no top end, I had no punch, and I had to pee really, really bad, which is not unusual that in a race this long one would have to stop to urinate. But I mean, we're like less than 5 minutes from the finish, and we've got a guy closing on us fast. Like, this person is hauling ass.
I forgot about that guy.
And I'm on Blake's wheel, and I said, Blake, I've got I've got to pee. And he's what?
That's so
like,
fucking
what are you
nice.
talking? What are you
So
talking
fucking
about?
nice.
You have to pee. It's like 5 more. I was like, no, man, like I've got to go. I've got to go now. And I mean, I suppose you could have ridden off, but you didn't for whatever reason. So thank you. But we stopped, and you know, I jump off. I try to pee as fast as I can. I just like I couldn't hold it, and this person just is like drilling it, closing the gap, and I think he got within, you know, 100 yards. He got pretty close.
Yeah, dude. He was,
and then we got back
striking
on
distance.
Yeah, he was definitely within striking distance. Like he could have gotten us, but he didn't. And then I don't know how, but summon one more effort. We managed to go hard briefly, just for a short enough period of time that he mentally no longer thought he could close the gap, which I think he totally could have. But we got him to quit trying, which is sometimes like the most important thing to do. And that meant that as we then got to downtown, I hope that they do this differently now, but the way it works, you go on this road briefly. Once you get off the gravel, you cut through, I think it's Emporia State University is maybe the name of the college that's there, where we were staying at the dorm, but you cut through the middle of the campus, you come off the campus, and then you get to a road that bisects Main Street. That's kind of another very major frontage road, and they don't have the road stopped. So you get to a stoplight when you're within 500 yards of the finish line. And I think we had a red light, and we're looking back. This person is closing on us. Yeah. Then we start again, and then I remember us having a discussion this year about, do we want to sprint for this or not? The previous year we had sprinted against each other, and we decided, let's hold hands. So that's what we did, which is a beautiful gesture of friendship. And then we finished the race. And
yeah, I totally forgot about that guy, man. Because afterwards he came up and was like, he was like, in his head, he felt like some great injustice was done to him, and the fact he saw us stop too, and he was like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you playing with me like that?" And it was, that poor guy. Sorry, that was funny. Yeah. He was a good sport about it though.
He'd been riding in the wind for a long. He's like, I've been trying to catch you. I've been trying to catch you for like an hour, and then you stopped to pee, and I was like, yeah, sorry, man. Yeah, you should have ridden a little bit harder.
Yeah, and then the one thing that I would change about the end, other than the finish, other than what you talk about, is that there isn't really a finish shoot. Like you shoot, and then there's like a dead stop,
right,
10 yards. And so if you're having any kind of race, and I think it's like in the spirit of gravel, it's not supposed to be a sprint at the end, but
it's a sprint, but not a sprint,
right? And so it's like, hey, look, if I'm going over 15 miles an hour, I'm likely gonna cause an accident that's going to bum everybody out by being too competitive here at the end. Give me a little bit longer of a shoot to finish. But yeah, man. And so I remember us going through the shoot, and then I think Salsa or somebody was sponsoring a bike clean station there. Do you remember that?
I do.
And I went over there, and Austin was there, and he looked like he just got done with a coffee ride. He was fresh as a daisy, cleaning off his bike. And I was like, hey man, great job. You're really hard to catch. And he was just so oblivious to how badly I wanted to beat him. He had no idea the inner monologue that that I had against him. And he's just like, oh yeah, man, it's cool. I like racing bikes. It's super fun. I'm like, to be that talented.
Yeah, he had his soigné there. I believe they were giving him a rub down. He had a towel around his neck, and he'd been given his recovery bottle. He seriously he had a team manager or something helping him, and his bike was up in the bike station. We talked to him, and yeah, we checked it. We're like, whoa, that's a cool bike. You're running rim brakes, huh? And somehow they had gotten frames that the Garmin team had used in the classics. So there was something this was a slightly longer wheelbase felt, I believe, and it had clearance for bigger tires. So, he was running 28s, which is just, honestly, still thinking about it today, I have no idea how somebody could ride a bike with 28 mil. I actually, you know what? I think they were running tubeless.
Yeah,
Is that possible? Could they have been running? I don't think so. I don't know. So it's just like totally implausible to me, but it was done. And
he looked like he got picked up from the starting line and just dropped at the finish. Like he was like, "Oh yeah, I just did a bike ride. It was great." You know?
Yeah,
you guys out there.
So like somebody had taken an action figure, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, hey, that's some people have that level of talent, and I'm sure he trained really hard and had a good ride. But he looked like, as Blake said, he'd just done a cafe ride and was probably ready to go deadlift 500 pounds or something. And yeah, so we washed our bikes off, and I knew as soon as we finished the race, I knew something was like really, really wrong with me. I had no appetite, which, as Blake knows, is incredibly abnormal.
Huge deal. Like as soon as we pass the finish line, Andy's usually like, "Okay, where's in and out? Like, where's the, you know." He's already got his order like dialed up on his phone for whatever freaking barbecue place we're gonna go afterwards, and he was just like not there.
Yeah, the previous year I had gotten a Papa John's pizza following the race on the way out of town. I think I ate the entire thing myself.
Yeah.
You know, so I think one of the learnings here is maybe more diet discipline to get down to that level where I could ride 28 mil tires. But yeah, we crossed the line and pretty much it was time to leave, and I was still in denial. I was trying to tell myself, "Oh, this is just because I didn't sleep last night or whatever." And, you know, after finishing the race, I think we had another hour of loading all of our huge piles of gear out of the
dorm, and
out of the dorm,
just getting clean, dude. Like we destroyed Emporia State's dorm bathrooms. Like I went in there. I remember. I think we just took showers in our full bike kit because it was so saturated with mud, and in my shoes. Just went and stood in like a dorm room shower for like 15 minutes just to uncake all of the mud that was on us. Like it was getting out of town was a process because our bikes were so dirty, our gear was so dirty, all of that stuff, and it took. I mean. After having raced your bike that hard, even me, I was feeling great. Like I was like, oh God, like this is such a slog. I can't imagine, you going through some stuff that must have been really annoying.
Yeah, taking that shower. I took my shower with my bike shoes on, like everything, because just had to get the mud off. We'd cleaned our bikes at the bike station with Austin, and then I did place a food order at a Mexican place on Main Street in Emporia, trying to kid myself into thinking I had an appetite. And once we finally got everything packed up, we went and picked up the food. And then my body suddenly felt really, really horrible. And I had that, what I would describe as the double blow feeling, like things were about to come out of both ends. And I had like this giant box of Mexican food, which I didn't touch. And I couldn't really talk. I just was like trying to hold. I was just like, I'm going to start vomiting everywhere was the feeling that I had.
Yeah. I couldn't tell, like I was like, man, he seems really bummed, but we did just get second and third, like I can't it doesn't seem very well, but also like we are kind of emotionally defeated. That was like a really gnarly day. Like for context, Chris Carmichael still has scars on the back of his heels from running through that mud. Like he had like the worst blisters. It was like a career defining event for some people. And so I was like, yeah, dude, he's just bummed out because it was a hard day, And I had no idea how bad it was for you there.
Yeah. And so we got on the road. We were heading back to Kansas City, which I think is around a 2.5, 3 hour drive. And at some point I was like, pull the car over. It had been like an hour since the race finished. I couldn't eat, and I was like, okay, I'm going to start vomiting everywhere. And I couldn't vomit, so I just like felt really uncomfortable. I started to have an extremely high fever, and then we got back to my parents' place in Kansas City. I barely said hi. I just went directly to bed, and then I had a really, really quite high fever and just was in bed until the next day. And then I didn't end up puking, but I was having another problem, and I couldn't keep any food in my body, and that then went on for about a week. I lost about 10 pounds. So just to fast forward, I was in Kansas City a couple days. I actually I had eye surgery like 2 days later. I got LASIK. I've been saving up. I've been saving up for LASIK for like 2 years, and there's a great just Dr. Dury Vision in Kansas City. If you're looking for LASIK, it's one of the best spots in the world. So I got LASIK, but I had just like felt horribly ill the entire time, including the trip back to the Bay Area. Get back to the Bay Area. Finally, like 3 or 4 days later, go to the doctor. They take some samples of my product, and that's when I learned I have Campylobacter, which is a very gnarly form of food poisoning. And I had lost over 10 pounds at that point. I couldn't keep any food down, and I don't remember. I think I had to be put on an antibiotic or something, but I was on broth for about a week and couldn't keep any food down.
Yeah, like you forgot. Like what's your normal caloric intake like?
Many.
Yeah, like you're probably around 4K, right, a day.
Yeah, probably around 4,000 calories a day on most days.
And you were like less. You were probably like less than 200 or 300 calories a day at that time after the race for a couple of days.
I couldn't keep anything down.
Yeah,
I went right back to work too during.
Yeah, it felt like when we got back to your parents' place, like when you're a kid and you're at your friend's house and they get in trouble, but you don't get in trouble, like your friends get in trouble, and you're waiting for your parents to come pick you up, and you're like just kind of hanging out by yourself at the house, you know, like you're talking to your friend's parents who are kind of mad at your friend, but they're like, yeah, I can't be mad at this kid. And you're just like, well, okay, I guess my parents are going to come pick me up eventually. Like that's how it felt for like 2 or 3 days when I was there.
Yeah, I didn't feel very good. And eventually I got antibiotics and I got better like a week later. And that's when I knew I was never going to win this race.
Yeah. That year felt like everybody there felt like they were on another level, and it felt like we could hang. But it did make it like there's something about like the professional gravel team vibe that I was like, oh, wow. Like the kids, the kids that weren't doing this before, that were the kind of people who could beat me at other stuff. Like they just showed up, and like they showed up with intent. And it was like, I don't think that this is going to be within my grasp for, another year.
Yeah, kudos to the victor. And
yeah, for sure.
The feeling that I had, though, I would agree. It was kind of like the bad guy in a ski movie showed up and like the townies were getting their asses kicked on the mountain.
Yeah.
That was kind of the vibe that I felt. And, that's also, maybe that sounds like sour grapes. Maybe it is sour grapes. We lost. They won. But yeah, I think that's the point at which things change and there would be no going back to the way things were before.
I agree. So not to do your job for you, but, Hardway Pod summary, what are some lessons here that you took away from this?
Yeah, I think one of the lessons is stay relaxed. As I noted, I have an obsessive attention to detail about things that I care about, where I want to be high performing. And one of the lessons for me with this particular event is, control what you can control, but you also have to find a way to downregulate and manage stress to be as effective as possible if you want to perform at your highest level. I also wonder for me my feeling is, given that I started that food poisoning or whatever really came on during the event, I don't know if that was already going on at the point at which I went to bed. I suspect that it might have been, and that's part of why I had such a hard time sleeping that night, that I was already sick before I even started the event. I don't know. But yeah, I think just continually, as much effort as you put into being able to express your fitness and ability at the highest level possible, I think you have to put just as much time and effort into being able to downregulate stress and being able to turn on and off the ability to have expressions of force and fitness is just as important as being able to relax like instantaneously. And that's something that I continue to work on. And also with this race, it was following this race, I believe that fall during cyclocross season is when I started to develop, or not started to, like I had an arrhythmia. I was having some problems with AFib. And that's also when I really started to think about, for my lifestyle, is this actually a healthy thing for me to do? And is putting my body under this degree of duress for these periods of time and intensity, is this something that's actually healthy for me to do? The answer for some people might be yes, continually over the course of their lifetime. But for me, the answer was I need to stop doing races this long at this high of an intensity. It just didn't feel healthy to me anymore.
Yeah. I remember, I mean, we had that conversation a few times. We had that conversation a lot, like, and they're like, what am I doing? Like, why am I actually doing this? That monologue, over, or whatever, that conversation, that dialogue, a lot during the training. And then, I don't think we did a ton of big events like this. You've done some mountain bike stage races since, but nothing that I think is as brutal in one shot as this race was.
No, I haven't done any one-day races that are as brutal as this since then. I'm not sure if I will again. I mean, I've continued to compete at a pretty low level in other forms of cycling. But yeah, for me, this was probably the end for me of going long like that. And I know it's ironic that this is actually the short distance of Unbound. But, we went looking for something. I got what I wanted out of the event. How about you, Blake? What are your takeaways?
You've heard me probably say this before, and I mentioned it earlier, but for me, the big takeaway that I always think about, I only child, kind of classic, like solo guy, like always go solo into my creative endeavors and want to take on projects by myself. And I don't really, collaborate a ton. And so the thing that helped us do well, if we, it's hard to look at this and be like, oh, forget that we got second and third. And really, like, we did finish in front of a lot of people. We actually did really well. Just objectively speaking.
We finished in front of about 450 people, I think.
Yeah, like that's, we did good. We did really good. So, anyways, the reason why we were able to do that is because we worked as a team, and we kept, for me, we kept like a positive attitude, and made jokes, and we were just supporting each other the whole way through it. And that was like I said, like we were blowing past guys who were way fitter than us, who looked much more like bike racers than we looked like. And the reason why we were doing that is because we were able to work together and keep it light, and to have that same approach in other areas of your life when you're, when I'm overwhelmed, or when I'm thinking about doing something else, like in a work situation, a creative situation, as counterintuitive as it may feel for me, having support or having a partner in an endeavor is just often makes the outcome exponentially better. And so it's something that I still struggle with. It's something I still work on, because I like to sit in my little corner of the sandbox. But this was a kind of, for me, a day of like hard evidence that works better.
Yeah, I want to share another takeaway, because when you share that, part of what I think about is the more time and space we have from this and other events is just how special that time in our lives was, and that this is something we got to share as friends. And that, like, we've had a lot of really special experiences through doing sport, physical training together. And I don't know, maybe we'll do a future episode about the touching story of how Blake and Andrew met at a soup kitchen. Where we were both volunteering, and it was our mutual interest in training. Blake was into CrossFit. Somehow we started talking about that. I wasn't doing it, but that's kind of what led to us starting to hang out together. And when I met Blake had never really ridden bikes, and getting to see what you did over time. And I think that there are probably a lot of times in our friendship and our relationship through sport that you wish at that moment in time you might have had the proficiency as a jiu-jitsu brown belt that you have now, so that you could have just choked me out and made me stop talking. But I tried to share as much as I knew about the sport with you. You took a lot of chances, as you mentioned. Like, even going out, being off-road was really uncomfortable. It's something that I've been doing for a couple of decades at the point at which we did this race. And, the experience itself aside, where we finished in the race aside, just like getting to share this and the friendship that I have with you is, that's priceless. And it was just great to get to share that with you. And now, we live in different places. We're doing different things, but I'm really grateful that we got to share that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's clutch, right? Like that was really, that was better than, I wouldn't say it's better than winning, but it was pretty close,
No, winning would have definitely would have made it better. Which, unfortunately, we didn't do. But we came close. We came as close as we could have for 2 years, and then I couldn't eat and made sick for a week afterwards.
Yeah.
So can you. Everybody's got it within you, and when it comes to sport, as we talked about on this episode, it truly to have the time and the resources, the money, the equipment to go do this stuff, you have to be in a really privileged position, which we were. And equally, being able to do that and going through these kind of manufactured situations where you encounter extreme physical duress and adversity, I really do think that it just like brings another dimension to who you are as a person. And for me personally, there is a degree of transferability to when you face other challenging moments in your life, because you can just think, well, someone may be talking to me I don't want to be talked to, or something happening at work that I don't want to have happen. That's emotionally uncomfortable and that doesn't feel good. But does it feel as bad as having food poisoning and not being able to eat and losing all the contents of your stomach for a week after running through mud for an hour, carrying a 50-pound bike in a 7-hour bike race? Probably not.
Yeah. No, it definitely, it's, doing hard things is, it's good for you, in sport and in life, for sure.
So Blake, if people want to follow your creations on the social media, on the TikTok, where do they go?
Just everything that I do is under Blake of Today. So just search for @Blake of Today on pretty much any social media platform, and you will find my content. Primarily focusing on TikTok right now, but I cross-post my content across all of my platforms, so you'll be able to see it.
Awesome. Blake, thanks for joining me, and we will get another race probably over a shorter distance with less running involved in the books in the near future.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
If you have questions, comments, feedback, or want to suggest a guest, please reach out to @HardwayPod on social or email me at choosethehardway@gmail.com. Please take a moment to hit 5 stars in Spotify or iTunes and leave a 1-word review. That helps more people connect with the powerful stories my guests share, and I really appreciate the support. You are what you overcome. Choose the hard way.